an audience. No, it's very good that you are here because it means that you're really interested in what David has to say. I'm very glad to have David here. He's been contributing with us the Order of the Bee, specifically because he's been contributing to the community for many, many years. He's been 7 years with Alfresco. Specifically for the Order of the Bee, in terms of organizing BeeCon, he's been 2 years consecutively being part of the program committee. That's very important for us because we have the internal view from the company that can say, oh look, these kind of things are kind of too big practices. We have to try to be careful about those kind of things. And he has a very good eye also for, okay, this kind of looks like a sales speech, so we have to be careful about that one too. So he's been doing a great contribution, and then he's a good friend also. So please welcome David Webster.
Thank you. Good morning. So I'm here today to talk about records management. Hopefully that's what you're here to listen to. So I've got about half an hour of your time. I'm going to go through some of the brand new APIs we've got coming soon. So I'm going to start with an introduction, explain the name change we've had recently, what we've done the last 12 months, and then I'll move on to the good stuff and start looking at the API and show you a potential example of what could be done with it. So, for those who don't know me, Boris gave a good introduction, but I'm David Webster. I'm lucky enough to have been an Alfresco employee for about 7 years. That's a fairly old photo of me up there, but it's the one I use as my avatar for most places. And so if you see that against a tweet or a commit or something, then I'm to blame for it. And so I'm one of the lead engineers on the governance services team, and I'll explain what that means in a bit, but we look after the RM product. So I previously worked on Share and forays into other Alfresco UI-based projects. Got background in web development, so I like JavaScript a lot. And I love the Alfresco community, so I think you guys are fantastic, and that's one of the reasons I've been with Alfresco for so long, I think, is because of such a good community we've got here. And I'm sorry that I don't get to spend as much time with you guys hanging out in IRC or on the community hub or in forums as I was like, but I'm always happy to hear from any of you, so if you've got any questions or issues, then drop me a line, and my contact details are at the end. So outside of work, I've got a wife and a couple of kids who keep me quite busy, but I still manage to find the time to volunteer with the search and rescue team, and I'll make that relevant later. So before we go any further, let me clarify what governance services actually is. So the change from records management to governance services just reflects the fact that managing records is just one aspect of governance that an organisation needs to worry about. And so stuff like data protection, freedom of information, the new GDPR legislation that's coming in, that's all stuff that applies not just to records in a records management site, that applies to content wherever it lives. So for example, the content classification that we put into 2.5, that applies to content, or it can apply to content that's anywhere in the repository. You don't have to have a record management site set up. So this team name change reflects the fact that we're working on more than just records. And I want to be clear that records management is that module's current vehicle for getting this functionality out to you guys. So if you want classified content, then you need the records management module. That may change in the future. We may split that out and have multiple governance modules, of which records management is one of them. But certainly for versions up to and including 2.6, the RM module is where it's all at from a governance perspective. So, what have we been up to in the last 12 months since I stood in front of you guys in Brussels? Well, we've been busy. We've been growing the team so we can do more and we can do it faster. There's now about 18 of us. It's got roughly sort of 60-40 split between alfresco engineers in Maidenhead and folk elsewhere. We've got new starters to the team, and we're now up to having 2 Scrum teams running full-time, fed by John Ibel and our product owner, Roy Weatherall, that a lot of you probably know. Let me know if you're curious about the internal team working practices, and I can go into details later. But there have been 21 releases over the last 12 months. A good mix of community, enterprise, maintenance stuff. You'll probably see from the number of hotfixes in there that we've takes quite a bit of effort doing the maintenance on a product that's as big as RM, and the maintenance burden for the core product exceeds that. So I don't know how much visibility you guys get on that, but that's a big effort that I think often goes unseen by you guys. And so, yeah, the new features I get to demo are just the tip of the iceberg of what we're working on. So, things exciting the last year, we've got the GitHub mirror working again with bi-directional syncing, so we can pull requests back in. So if you make a contribution to our community records management project, we can easily pour that into our internal Git server that Samuel was talking about yesterday. We can run that up against Bamboo, do all the tests. We've also made Travis integration open, so you can see some partial builds, doesn't run the full builds, but you can see those against any community contributions. So that's a quick review of the last 12 months. And yesterday, especially for you guys, we got 2.5b out. That's the latest records management community module released. That's the first one we've done with 5.2 compatibility. So if you're running a community version of 5.2, then 5.2b is the version you want, and that's available now. So let's look at those exciting governance services APIs and their namespace as governance services, because we're building in the flexibility to add the ability to work against non-records as well. Those. So previously the APIs were a byproduct of development we were doing elsewhere, and that's changed a lot. You've heard people talk about the APIs a fair bit, and that's because they're a feature of the digital platform now in their own right, in a way they never were before. So that's why I'm up on stage talking about APIs rather than shiny UI stuff that I would normally be doing. And when I'm talking about the APIs, what I mean here is the V1 style REST APIs that we've got. So the old APIs you're familiar using, the Java ones, the old REST APIs that we're now calling V0, they haven't gone anywhere. They're still exactly where they were. They still may change between releases, may not. Who knows? But they're starting to get to the point where we're looking to deprecate those and recommend that you should use the V1 REST APIs in preference for any extension work you're doing, any custom development where possible. So one of the things we do in the team is API first development. So the first thing we do when we get a feature in the value bundle and we start working on it is we spec out, we do the API design, get that reviewed by the team and make sure that it meets what the UI needs, it works with the content model. We then get that reviewed by the core team, so people like Jan will go through that, make sure it fits with the way the core APIs work. So we're really looking at providing a consistent interface across the whole platform, and that's what we're getting the point we're getting to with this 2.6 release and the 5.2 core is a kind of consistent core governance API. And this API first technique is really good for Scrum teams because it enables us to work on the UI and the back end in parallel, really, because we can mock out because we've got the API designed, we can mock out the responses from the server to the UI, and that allows us to parallelize the development process much more, so we can get a more complete feature story completed in a shorter sprint period. So, what can you do with the APIs? Well, in scope for 2.6 is complete file planned CRUD operations. So all the way from getting the RM site set up, getting the structure in place that's necessary to organise records into categories, subcategories, sub-subcategories, record folders, etc., including unfiled containers, whatever you need. And once that's set up, you can then file a record into it. You can edit metadata on that record, you can get that record content back. If you've got content elsewhere in the repo, you can declare that as a record using the APIs. And so we've designed them so basically you can do everything necessary to get the records into the system in the right place and with the correct metadata. And that's no coincidence, really. That's part of a bigger plan that we've had. This work has been done as part of a record ingestion benchmarking project that we've had ongoing. That's still in progress, and I'll probably be able to give you more details about that at a later point. The need for that coincided with the sort of digital business platform strategy, and APIs are fundamental to that. So that's why you've been hearing so much about the APIs, because they are so vital. So what we want to do is make sure that the platform works for all of your use cases. So if there's anything that we're not covering in the APIs, any use cases you think we're not addressing, talk to us. We're pretty friendly, let us know, and we'd like to get those into the backlog and prioritised appropriately. And for instance, one of the features we've got in the backlog that we haven't yet got around to doing, but we haven't forgotten about, is getting these APIs into the JavaScript API. So at the moment, the stuff Will was demoing with the JavaScript API interface, that doesn't include any of these governance capabilities. But that's not something we're ignoring. It's in the backlog. It just hasn't bubbled up to the top of the priority list yet. So, how should you learn about the APIs? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I find the best way to learn any tech is to dive in and start playing with it. And we've made it really easy for you guys to do that. So, got a couple of options: API Explorer and Postman. And these options kind of mirror what we've been demoing and talking about with the core API. So again, trying to keep it consistent. So out of the box, once you install RM, you'll have access to the GS API Explorer, and that's automatically generated from the YAML Open API definition files that we use to define them. So it's a combination of documentation and REST client. So one of the really cool things about this documentation is there's a try it out button. So you can put in parameters, you can click a button, and you can actually test a live call right from within documentation. So it's live, interactive documentation. And it's all fully reviewed by our user assistance team. So hopefully it actually makes sense and it's readable as well. So it's probably worth noting that our API implementation isn't automatically generated from the Open API files. And so there's potential for differences between the implementation and the documentation, as there always is, but that would be considered a bug. So if you see any differences, if the behaviour is not quite what we said it would be, let us know through Jira, and we'll either fix the code or the documentation, depending on which is better. So what we're also doing is giving you access to a Postman collection. There's a GitHub URL that was on the screen just now and will be on the slide at the end. And it's a really useful app that you can download for free. It's a basic REST client, but it's got some quite advanced features like collections that allow us to share JSON kind of combinations of calls, and you can compose them together into kind of useful. It's been really useful for this demo because I can just set it up and step through it, which I'll do in a second. So I'm going to change tack slightly, and did anyone see Jan's talk yesterday? He did a great job of going through, great, couple of people. Cool. So yeah, he did a great job of going through the core APIs and the API framework. And his talk was titled Exciting APIs. And he called that out in his introduction. And said he was going to try and make APIs exciting. And I think APIs really are exciting, maybe not in and of themselves, but in the potential that they offer the platform. So these new APIs, I think, more than ever, turn Alfresco into a jigsaw piece that can fit in and plug in with almost limitless number of other systems, other platforms. And we saw that in the hackathon demo yesterday. Well, hopefully you saw that. We showed it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the APIs, but I'm going to show you them in a way that touches on the excitement I feel about them in a way that's close to my heart. So I mentioned at the start, I'm a search and rescue volunteer. And I don't know what the situation is in other countries, but in the UK, the police are responsible for missing person searches, but they don't always have the resources and the skills they need to actually search for someone. And so that's where there's a network of volunteer search and rescue teams set up that are charities manned by people who volunteer their time. And I'm one of those volunteers who do that. And it may not seem like it, but that actually generates quite a bit of paperwork. There's quite a lot of processes involved. And so if you were to sit in the control van with me while I was managing a search, you'd see we just generated endless amounts of content. And what happens with that content is it all, at the end of the search, it's all paper, it goes into a filing cabinet, and given my day job, that grates a bit, that's not a bit more digital and a bit better, because it's all records, we could be required to kind of go back to a search a couple of years later in a coroner's court or something like that. So it's all important stuff that we need to kind of look after properly, and at the moment it's all just locked in a filing cabinet. So I'm going to talk through an example of how these APIs could potentially help search and rescue team. So police receive a report of a missing person. They go through, decide that person's vulnerable, which means they may come to harm if we don't find them quickly. So they phone us, and what we do is we answer the call, and then that's where we start generating some content. So what I'll show you is we've got a in share here, login, nice orange login screen. Yeah, so we should have a empty file plan, set it up correctly, with a single root category and nothing else in it. Great, so using this Postman collection, you can see up here we've got some, hopefully you can read that, there's some tokens there in the URL, and that enables us to set up environments, so I could switch between running this locally or on a AWS instance or something similar. So let's stick with localhost, and got basic auth in the headers, in the body, creating a record category with that name. I'll send that see the response. It all looks good. Let's create a record folder. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the call log. So this is something that could be done automatically by the software we use to manage the incoming calls. So let's upload that and declare that as a record. And then if we go back to share, reload that. There we go, we've got that record category, we've got the record folder, and we've got the record declared. So I'm just using share here as a good way of visualizing what's happening, but you see we don't need to do that. So coming back to the scenario, we've received the request, we then get the brief from the police, so we start collecting data on the missing person, and so what we do now is we can get a copy of that missing person data, and we can create a folder to store that. There we go. And then we can upload the brief we got from the police. So I've got that attached there. Let's send that. And then if we go back into share, we can see we've got a Miss the Details folder, and that's got the record in it. So back in Postman, something I didn't show you earlier is that you can run tests when a response comes back. And again, these are all defined in the JSON file. And what we're doing here is we're using the test not just to verify the status code, but also set a global variable which stores the ID of this case the record, or what we could do is here for the folder, we're storing that as a variable that we can then access later to add stuff automatically into that folder from other scripts later on. So next step is to mobilize the team, get the team out, get them on scene and start to look for the person. So again, that requires sending out a lot of text messages, and we need to record a log of who said they can attend, when they're going to be there, where we ask them to go, etc. So let's create a structure for that, and then let's attach the logs. We use a API service called Twilio that we could look at getting these API hooks into to do something like this. And again, you can see those are all uploaded there into RM. So let's skip ahead a little bit. We've been out searching for a couple of hours now. Might be getting dark soon. But luckily, search team has found the missing person. So what happens now is that the medic goes in, they do an assessment, that generates more content. So in this case, it's a patient report form that we go through, and that helps the medic assess the casualty and work out what's wrong, record what state they're in when we find them, and then we do the observations at set intervals, and we can see the trend in that, kind of whether they're improving or getting worse. We want everything to go up and to the right generally, so they're getting better. So that PRF that we generate, patient report form, is again that's personal information. So what we'd ideally do is when we declare that as a record, we could mark that using our security markings as personal information. We don't quite have the APIs there for that yet. That's one of those use cases that we haven't addressed in this initial round of APIs, but they're on the backlog, so they will be coming. So yeah, we've declared that. So next step, so we found the Mispo. She's been covered by the medic, returned to a safe place, and now we can stand the team down and head home. But before we can do that, we need to finish off all the paperwork and upload a copy of that scanned paperwork so it's accessible. Should we need to share that with the police or anyone else, we can do that easily if it's not locked away in a filing cabinet somewhere. And so that's the end of the story about that search and rescue case. But hopefully it's not the end of the API story for you guys. It should just be the start of that. And hopefully a lot of you guys out there are looking at what we just did and thinking process. So we've not touched on process today, but hopefully you can see here how process would fit into that. And this example kind of, I think, reinforces this triple of process, content, governance that you'll have heard previously this conference. So maybe next time when I'm standing up here on stage, I'll be able to go through an example like that, but that includes process as well. And so quick recap. Governance is a key part of the digital business platform. We're introducing the governance services APIs in RM2.6. First drop of 2.6 community, we're hoping to get out next month. Don't hold me to that, but that's what our current hope is. If you want to check it out before then, check out the nightlies or go to GitHub, download the code and build it from there. So the APIs I've shown they're all mastered, they're all exactly as is in GitHub. Reiterate, these build in close partnership with the core API team, so they match the request formats, the response formats, the general concepts all match. So hopefully it's a coherent set of APIs for you to use. They cover full file plan setup, record ingestion use cases. If you want the docs, Swagger's the best place for those. Hopefully once we get the community release done, we'll be able to get those published publicly somewhere, like the core API Explorer docs are. Again, that's an item on the backlog we've not done yet, but hopefully we will. And the Postman collection is up on GitHub. Download that, and that'll help you get started really quickly. So, yeah, thank you for your time. I know it's not easy to get up at 9 o'clock on day 4 of a conference, so I appreciate you getting here. And do get in touch if you're using these APIs. I'd like to hear what you're using them to do. So let me know. And I'm on Twitter, GitHub as David Cognite. So check us out there. And I think we've got time for a couple of questions for us. So
first,
yeah, so we have some time for questions. Here we have one.
Thanks, David, for the presentations. I think you covered most of the things what I'm looking for. One thing what I found missing is API for retention schedule.
yes,
I didn't see that there.
that's because it's not there yet.
It's not there. And all this API what you have shown is available from which version?
2.6,
Only 2.6, not
Oh.
before that?
only 2.6. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's not being backported or anything.
So you need Alfresco 5.2?
Correct.
After 2.6. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
That was an informative question, Sushi. So I have more questions. So what is more into a community edition and enterprise edition from what we can use from the APIs actually?
So the policy we've got in governance is that if the feature's in community, the API for that feature will be in community. So all the APIs I've shown are community APIs. So when it comes to features like content classification is the big one. that's not available in community. So the APIs for that won't be in community, obviously.
Do you have more questions? Yeah.
I just wondered if there's any plans for some ADF components around these APIs.
There are. We're trying to work out where governance fits in with all the ADF stuff. I've got at least 2 meetings next week to discuss that. So it's something we've been looking at, playing with, trying to work out what the strategy is. And yeah, so watch this space.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, so very last question if you have. Otherwise, really thanks again, David.